At my husband's company anniversary dinner, the one I helped build from nothing, Marcus stood up in front of every client, every employee, every person who knew us, looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Sandra, I think it's time we stop pretending. I want a divorce." His assistant, Vanessa, sat 3 seats away from me at the head table, wearing a black dress I'd never seen before, pearl earrings I didn't recognize, and a smile that told me she'd been waiting for this moment for a long time. The ballroom went completely silent. Forks stopped mid-air. Wine glasses froze halfway to lips. 47 employees who had watched me show up to company picnics, holiday parties, and late-night crisis meetings stared at me like I was a car accident they couldn't look away from. My friend Diana, who'd been my only confidant through all of this, squeezed my hand under the table so hard I felt her rings cut into my fingers. But I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't throw my glass of Chardonnay at anyone, though God knows the thought crossed my mind. Instead, I reached into my evening bag, the small gold clutch I'd bought specifically for this night, pulled out a sealed white envelope, and placed it on the white linen tablecloth directly in front of Marcus. I looked at him with the steadiest gaze I could manage and said, "I know, Marcus. I've known for a while. That envelope is for you." Then I stood, smoothed the front of my burgundy gown, the one he'd said made me look beautiful just 3 hours earlier when we left the house together, and I walked out of that ballroom with my spine straight and my head high. I was almost to the elevator when I heard it, a sound I will never forget as long as I live. Not just his voice breaking, crumbling, collapsing into something desperate and jagged that echoed down the corridor and followed me all the way to my car. Before I tell you what was in that envelope, I need you to understand something. This story isn't really about Marcus. It's about what happens when a woman who spent 15 years making herself smaller finally decides to stand up to her full height. If you're watching this and you've ever given everything you had to someone who treated it like it was worth nothing, I need you to hit that like button right now and subscribe to this channel. Leave me a comment and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to know how far this story has reached, because what I'm about to tell you changed my entire life. Now let me take you back to where this really began. Marcus and I met 17 years ago at a small accounting firm where we both worked as junior analysts. I was 28 years old, sharp with numbers, ambitious, and completely convinced that I had a future in corporate finance. Marcus was handsome in that quiet, confident way that makes you think someone has everything figured out. He was thoughtful, attentive, and told me within 6 months of our first date that he wanted to build something real with me. 2 years later, we were married in a small ceremony with 30 people. Practical, we called it. Intentional, we're going to save our money and invest it into something that mattered. That something turned out to be his dream. Marcus had always talked about starting his own marketing consultancy. He had the vision, the charisma, and the client relationships. What he needed was someone who understood finances, could manage the back-end operations, and was willing to sacrifice stability for the chance to build something from scratch. That someone was me. I left a stable job with benefits, a pension track, and a clear path to senior analyst to co-found Callaway Strategic Group with my husband. We used my savings, my pristine credit score, and my financial expertise to get the business off the ground. While Marcus met with clients and pitched campaigns, I built the entire operational infrastructure of that company. The accounting systems, the payroll, the vendor contracts, the tax filings, the compliance documentation. Every invisible thing that makes a company run, I built it. In the early years, we told ourselves we were a team, equal partners. We were going to build this together and then live off it together. I remember the energy of those first years. We worked out of our spare bedroom. I built spreadsheets on a folding table while Marcus made calls on the front porch so he wouldn't disturb me. We ate a lot of takeout. We celebrated small wins, a new client, a first retainer agreement, the day we could afford to rent actual office space, with cheap champagne and genuine happiness. Those years were hard and they were real, and I believed completely in what we were building. The company's name was Marcus's idea. Callaway Strategic Group. His surname. His identity. I hadn't thought much about it at the time. Names are practical things, and Callaway was clean and professional and easy to say. It did not occur to me until much later that I had helped build something that bore no trace of me at all. That I had poured 15 years of my expertise and my labor and my financial foundation into an enterprise where my name appeared nowhere on the door. By the time I understood what that meant, it was already the truth. When the company started growing, Marcus hired staff. Naturally, he became the face of the brand, the person in every meeting, the one getting photographed at industry events. I stayed in the back office, making sure the foundation held while he built the exterior walls everyone else could see. I told myself that was fine. That was the deal. Someone had to be the engine, and someone had to be the face. I was good at what I did, and I found meaning in it. Then Vanessa joined the company. She was 26 when Marcus hired her as his executive assistant. Organized, energetic, and completely devoted to making his professional life easier. I had no reason to suspect anything at first. She was polite to me at company events. She remembered my coffee order. She sent me a birthday card signed from the whole office. But slowly, the way Marcus talked about her began to change. Vanessa suggested we restructure the client onboarding process. Brilliant idea. Vanessa handled that presentation beautifully. She really gets the brand. Vanessa and I have been working late this week on the Harmon account. She's incredible under pressure. Every conversation about work began and ended with her name. I noticed how his phone screen tilted away when she texted. How he started going to the gym at 6 in the morning even though he'd never been a morning person. How he began buying new clothes without mentioning it. How he smelled like something unfamiliar on nights he claimed to have worked until 9. I told myself I was being paranoid. Then I found the receipt. I was going through a jacket pocket before, dropping off dry cleaning when I found a crumpled receipt from a restaurant on the other side of the city. A restaurant I had never been to with my husband. Dinner for 2. A bottle of wine that cost $240. The date stamped on it was our 12th wedding anniversary. The same evening, Marcus had told me he was stuck at a client dinner he couldn't get out of, and that we'd celebrate on the weekend. We never celebrated on the weekend. He said he wasn't feeling well. I sat on the floor of our laundry room for a long time holding that piece of paper. I want to tell you that I confronted him immediately, that I was brave enough to walk into the kitchen and lay it down in front of him and demand the truth. But I didn't, because I already knew what he would say. He would explain it away smoothly. Tell me it was a client. Look at me, with that particular expression of patient disappointment he'd perfected over the years that made me feel like I was the problem for asking. So instead, I started paying attention in a different way. I had spent 15 years building and managing the financial infrastructure of his company. I knew every account number, every bank relationship, every vendor payment schedule. And when I started looking, really looking, I found things that confirmed every fear I'd been trying to silence. There were expense reports for client entertainment that didn't match any client files I could find. Hotel charges in cities where no Callaway projects were scheduled. A car rental in Charleston for a long weekend in October. A weekend Marcus had told me he spent golfing with his college friend Drew. I called Drew's wife 2 weeks later just to make conversation and casually mentioned how funny it was that the guys had gotten that trip in before the weather changed. She paused for a moment and said, "Oh, I didn't know Marcus went." Drew was home that whole weekend. That was the moment I stopped doubting myself. I called my college roommate, Patricia Chun. Patricia had gone on to become one of the most respected forensic accountants in the state, specializing in financial fraud and divorce asset discovery. We'd stayed close over the years, meeting for lunch whenever her schedule allowed, and I trusted her with my life. "I need your help," I told her. "And I need absolute discretion. Come to my office," she said. "Bring everything you have." The next morning, I sat across from Patricia while she went through the financial records I'd compiled. She was quiet for a long time, methodical. When she finally looked up, her expression was serious. "Sandra, how much do you know about the ownership structure of Callaway Strategic Group?" "I'm a 50% co-founder," I said. "It's in the original incorporation documents." Patricia turned her laptop toward me. "Were you ever issued shares formally? Was there a shareholder agreement?" I stared at the screen. The familiar documents, the ones I had helped prepare 15 years ago. And then I saw something I had never noticed because I had trusted him completely. The original shareholder agreement had been amended 18 months after the company launched. A quiet amendment, buried in a filing update, that restructured the ownership allocation. Marcus had 70%. A holding company I didn't recognize had the remaining 30%. My name was nowhere on the amended document. My hands went cold. "What is this holding company?" I asked. Patricia was already typing. It took her less than 10 minutes to trace it. The holding company was registered in the name of Marcus's older brother, a man who had nothing to do with the business, who had never worked a single day for Callaway Strategic Group. A shell entity used to quietly remove my ownership stake from the company I had built with my own hands. I had been erased from the company while still doing the work of running it. Patricia kept her voice even and professional, but I could see the anger beneath it. "When you co-founded the business, did you contribute personal funds?" $60,000 of my personal savings," I said. "And I co-signed every business loan for the first 4 years. And you continued to perform financial management functions for the business without a formal employment contract or compensation agreement." "I thought I was a partner," I said quietly. "I didn't think I needed a contract with my husband." Patricia closed the laptop. "Sandra, I want you to understand something clearly. What I'm looking at here is not just an affair. This is financial fraud. And you have more leverage than you probably realize." She explained what we were looking at. Because I had contributed personal capital, co-signed loans, and provided years of uncompensated professional services to the business, I had legal grounds to claim both ownership equity and compensation. The amendment to the shareholder agreement, made without my knowledge or consent, while I was still actively performing the role of a co-founder, was legally challengeable, and the expense account irregularities could constitute improper use of business funds, which would be relevant in any divorce proceeding. "You need to file first," Patricia told me, "before he moves anything else." "There's something else I want to do first," I said. She looked at me. "He's planning a company anniversary dinner next month. 15 years of Callaway Strategic Group. He's been planning it for months. He wants it to be this grand celebration in front of all their clients and employees. He's been so proud of himself." Patricia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "How long do you need?" 3 weeks. She nodded slowly. 3 weeks. The next 3 weeks were the performance of my life. I went home every evening and made dinner. I asked Marcus about his day. I listened while he talked about the anniversary dinner, the venue he'd chosen, the caterer, the guest list. I told him it sounded wonderful. I told him I was proud of everything he'd built. I used the word he. He didn't notice. During the days, I worked quietly with Patricia. We documented everything. Every irregularity in the expense accounts, every wire transfer to the holding company, every hotel receipt I'd photographed, every piece of evidence I'd been quietly gathering for weeks. Patricia connected me with a family law attorney named Rebecca. Assay, who specialized in high-asset divorces involving business interests. Rebecca was calm, precise, and absolutely relentless. The shareholder amendment is our strongest card, she told me, during our second meeting. But the financial misconduct in the expense accounts gives us leverage over the business itself, and your contributions of capital and uncompensated labor give you grounds for a significant, equitable claim, regardless of what those amended documents say. What does that mean practically? I asked. It means, Rebecca said, that your husband spent 15 years building a company on your back and then tried to erase your name from it. The courts tend to have strong feelings about that. We filed the divorce petition on a Thursday. Rebecca arranged for it to be served on the following Monday, 2 days after the company anniversary dinner. I wanted Marcus to walk into that event believing he was in control. I wanted him to make his announcement, to do exactly what I suspected he was planning to do, in front of every witness that mattered. Because I had figured something out about Marcus in all those weeks of watching and planning. He was not going to leave quietly. He was going to make a scene. He was going to humiliate me publicly because he had convinced himself that humiliation was the only power he had left over me. He wanted me to fall apart in front of his clients, his employees, his world. He wanted everyone to see that leaving me was easy, obvious, justified. I was going to let him try. The evening of the anniversary dinner, I got dressed slowly and carefully. I wore the burgundy gown. I put on the diamond earrings my mother had left me. I looked at myself in the mirror for a long time. Then I picked up the white envelope from my dresser, slipped it into my evening bag, and went downstairs to meet my husband. The ballroom at the Whitmore Hotel was beautiful. 15 years of client relationships filling 40 tables. A display along one wall showed the company's history, photographs of campaigns, awards, growth milestones. And in nearly every photograph from the early years, if you looked at the edge of the frame, you could find me, standing just outside the center, holding something, organizing something, making something possible. Vanessa was at the event in a professional capacity, ostensibly to manage logistics. She did an excellent job of not looking at Marcus too often. She did a less excellent job of hiding the fact that she already knew what was coming. I watched them both all evening and felt nothing except clarity. When Marcus stood up to give his speech halfway through the dinner, I felt the shift in the room before he even spoke. He had the microphone and the attention of everyone in that ballroom, and there was something in his posture that told me he had rehearsed this moment. He talked about 15 years, about vision and growth and the incredible team he'd built. He was eloquent and warm, and everyone was smiling. And then he paused, looked directly at me, and said the words he'd apparently been planning for months. Before I close, I want to be honest with you all, because this company was built on honesty. Sandra and I have reached the end of our road together. I think it's time we stop pretending. I want a divorce. The silence that followed was the kind that has weight. I could feel everyone waiting for me to cry, to shout, to make a scene that would become the story people told for years about the night Marcus Calloway announced his divorce at his own company dinner. Instead, I reached into my bag. I placed the envelope on the table. I said what I said, and I walked out. I was sitting in my car in the parking structure when my phone started ringing. Diana first, then my sister, then an unknown number I didn't answer. I sat in the quiet for 40 minutes before I drove home. Later, Diana called me back and told me what had happened after I left. Marcus had opened the envelope at the table. Inside was not a letter, not a plea, not anything emotional at all. Inside was a single document, a 2-page summary prepared by Rebecca Ossé, outlining the legal claims I intended to pursue, the fraudulent shareholder amendment, the uncompensated contributions of capital and labor, the improper business expense charges, the discovery of the amended documents and what they meant for the division of the company's current valuation. which Rebecca had conservatively estimated at $4.2 million. And at the bottom, one line in Rebecca's crisp legal letterhead: formal divorce petition to be served Monday, February 17th. Retain counsel immediately. Diana told me that Marcus read it twice, that his face went from confusion to disbelief to something that looked like free fall, that he looked at Vanessa across the room and she saw his expression and came over and read the document herself. That what followed was not a romantic moment between two people whose love had finally been set free. It was two people suddenly understanding that the future they had imagined was not the future they were going to get. She walked out, Diana told me. Vanessa. She just picked up her clutch and walked out without saying a word to him. Didn't even get her coat. She left him there, standing at the head table in front of 47 employees, Diana said, holding a legal document, alone. The divorce took 8 months to finalize. Rebecca was extraordinary. The shareholder amendment challenge was the centerpiece of our case, and the evidence that Marcus had restructured the company, ownership without my knowledge or consent, while I continued performing essential financial management functions for the business, was damning. His attorneys tried multiple angles to undermine our position. None of them worked. In the final settlement, I received 40% of the company's current valuation, paid out over 4 years. I received reimbursement for my original capital contribution with interest. I received spousal support for 6 years. I received the house. Marcus was permitted to keep the company, which was appropriate. I had no interest in running a marketing consultancy. I had other plans. Patricia's forensic review of the expense accounts resulted in a separate accounting claim that Marcus settled quietly to avoid further scrutiny. Vanessa had left the company 2 weeks after the dinner. Word reached me, through mutual acquaintances, that she had taken a position at a competing firm on the other side of the city. I heard nothing further about her and felt no curiosity. Kevin, a senior account manager at Callaway who had known Marcus and me both personally and professionally for years, sent me a handwritten note 3 weeks after the dinner. It said simply, "I always knew you were the one holding that place together. I'm sorry it took this for people to see it." I kept that note. 11 months after the anniversary dinner, I was sitting at a new desk in a new office space in the Arts District, looking out at a street full of small businesses and foot traffic and the kind of energy that makes you feel like something is possible. The business was called Clarity Financial Consulting, and it was mine. I had spent 15 years as the invisible engine of someone else's dream. I knew how to build financial infrastructure from nothing. I knew how to manage growth, control costs, structure compliance, and protect a company's foundation from the kind of mismanagement that destroys businesses from the inside out. I had done all of that for someone who had tried to erase me from the record. Now I was doing it for myself, and for the small and mid-size businesses run by people who needed someone with my expertise and couldn't afford to be taken advantage of. My first 3 clients came from referrals. One of them was a woman who had recently left a business partnership under difficult circumstances and needed help restructuring her finances. We talked for 3 hours at our first meeting. She cried once. I didn't offer her empty comfort. I offered her a strategy. She later told me that meeting changed the direction of her life. That is the work I was always meant to do. I want to tell you about the months between the dinner and the settlement, because they were not easy months. I want to be honest with you about that. There were nights when the anger was so large it had no edges. Nights when I would sit in what used to be our bedroom and run through the timeline in my head, trying to identify the exact moment when things had shifted, when Marcus had decided I was someone he could afford to discard. I never could identify it precisely. That's the thing about a slow betrayal. It doesn't announce itself. It just quietly rearranges the furniture of your life while you're asleep. There were also moments of doubt. My attorney was excellent and the case was strong, but litigation is not a clean process, and there were weeks when Marcus's attorneys filed motions that were designed simply to exhaust and destabilize. I recognized the strategy because I had watched it used in business negotiations for years. Make the other party so tired of fighting that they accept less than they deserve just to make it stop. I did not accept less than I deserved. What helped me through those months was work, not Marcus's work anymore. My own. I had started doing some informal consulting in the evenings, small businesses that needed help making sense of their financial position. Word spread through the network of women I knew, many of whom ran their own operations and had been quietly frustrated for years by advisors who talked over them or treated their questions as naive. I didn't do that. I sat across from them and I answered every question completely, and I showed them exactly what was happening with their money and exactly what they could do about it. One of those women told me, "You explain things like you actually want me to understand them." I do. Because I spent 15 years in a situation where the person who should have wanted me to understand things had a financial incentive for me not to. Another thing that helped was the community that formed around me without my having asked for it. Diana, who had been my closest friend for a decade. My sister Renee, who drove 4 hours to sit with me the weekend after the dinner and didn't ask me to talk about it until I was ready. The women I was consulting with informally, who shared pieces of their own stories with me over coffee tables and kitchen counters, and who helped me understand that what I had been through was not unique to me, but was part of a pattern far larger than one bad marriage. Women who disappear into someone else's life and then get surprised when they can't find themselves anymore. I think about those women a lot now. When I finally opened the doors of Clarity Financial Consulting, I wrote a mission statement that was really just a description of the work I wish someone had done for me. Transparent, rigorous, honest financial guidance for people who have been told their questions are too small, or their situations too complicated, or their goals not serious enough to deserve real attention. Every single word of that mission statement came directly from my own experience. Marcus called me once, about 6 months after everything was finalized. His voice was quieter than I remembered it. He said he wanted me to know he regretted how things had happened. He said he knew he had treated me unfairly. He used the word unfairly carefully, like a man who has been coached by an attorney on what to admit and what not to. I let him finish. Then I said, "I appreciate you saying that, Marcus. I genuinely hope you build something good going forward." He seemed surprised that I didn't have more to say. But I really didn't. Here is what I want you to take from my story. Not the revenge part, though I understand why that's the part people want to hear. The part I want you to carry with you is this: the 15 years I spent making myself invisible, making myself useful in ways that were never acknowledged, convincing myself that my turn would come eventually. Those years were not wasted. They were education. They were preparation. They built exactly the skill set I needed to build something that actually belonged to me. The woman who walked out of that ballroom was not the same woman who had walked in 15 years earlier. She was someone who had learned at enormous cost exactly what she was worth. When someone shows you that they believe your value is negotiable, that your contributions can be quietly erased, that your dignity is something they can revoke in public without consequence, believe them, and then show them, calmly and with complete precision, exactly what they have miscalculated. The best revenge is not anger, it is accuracy. The day I signed the lease on my office space, I sat alone in the empty room for a long time before I did anything else. The room was small. White walls, bare floors, one window that looked out onto the street. Nothing in it yet. Another thing that helped was the community that formed around me without my having asked for it. Diana, who had been my closest friend for a decade. My sister Renee, who drove 4 hours to sit with me the weekend after the dinner and didn't ask me to talk about it until I was ready. The women I was consulting with informally, who shared pieces of their own stories with me over coffee tables and kitchen counters, and who helped me understand that what I had been through was not unique to me, but was part of a pattern far larger than one bad marriage. Women who disappear into someone else's life and then get surprised when they can't find themselves anymore. I think about those women a lot now. When I finally opened the doors of Clarity Financial Consulting, I wrote a mission statement that was really just a description of the work I wish someone had done for me. Transparent, rigorous, honest financial guidance for people who have been told their questions are too small, or their situations too complicated, or their goals not serious enough to deserve real attention. Every single word of that mission statement came directly from my own experience. Marcus called me once, about 6 months after everything was finalized. His voice was quieter than I remembered it. He said he wanted me to know. He regretted how things had happened. He said he knew he had treated me unfairly. He used the word unfairly carefully, like a man who has been coached by an attorney on what to admit and what not to. I let him finish. Then I said, "I appreciate you saying that, Marcus. I genuinely hope you build something good going forward." He seemed surprised that I didn't have more to say. But I really didn't. Here is what I want you to take from my story. Not the revenge part, though I understand why that's the part people want to hear. The part I want you to carry with you is this: the 15 years I spent making myself invisible, making myself useful in ways that were never acknowledged, convincing myself that my turn would come eventually. Those years were not wasted. They were education. They were preparation. They built exactly the skill set I needed to build something that actually belonged to me. The woman who walked out of that ballroom was not the same woman who had walked in 15 years earlier. She was someone who had learned at enormous cost exactly what she was worth. When someone shows you that they believe your value is negotiable, that your contributions can be quietly erased, that your dignity is something they can revoke in public without consequence, believe them, and then show them, calmly and with complete precision, exactly what they have miscalculated. The best revenge is not anger, it is accuracy. The day I signed the lease on my office space, I sat alone in the empty room for a long time before I did anything else. The room was small. White walls, bare floors, one window that looked out onto the street. Nothing in it yet. Just space. My space. I thought about the woman who had walked into a junior analyst job 17 years ago, believing that the right combination of hard work and love and loyalty would be enough. I thought about all the times I had convinced myself to be patient, to wait, to trust that what I was giving was being seen and valued. I thought about the $60,000 from my personal savings that had gone into starting a business that had been quietly restructured to cut me out. I thought about all the photographs on that anniversary dinner display wall where I was standing at the edge of the frame, present, contributing, invisible by design. And then I thought about Rebecca Oze, sitting across from me in her office, with those financial documents spread out between us, saying, "You have more leverage than you probably realize." I thought about Patricia Chun tracing that shell company in 10 minutes. I thought about Diana's hand squeezing mine under that tablecloth. I thought about my sister, Renee, driving 4 hours to sit with me without being asked. I thought about every woman who had shared her story with me over a kitchen table in those quiet evening consulting sessions. Women who had learned, as I had, that being indispensable to someone does not protect you from being discarded by them. Women who had stayed too long and given too much and then had to figure out, at 50 or 45 or 60, what it meant to live for themselves. I sat in that empty room and I felt very clearly that every single thing that had happened had brought me to exactly where I was supposed to be. Not in spite of the pain, because of it. Alongside it, The two things together, the loss and the clarity it created, had made me into someone capable of building exactly what I was about to build. I took out my notebook. I wrote at the top of the first page what I know how to do. The list took up 3 pages. Then I took out my notebook and started writing down everything I was going to build. There was a lot to write. If this story reached you today, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Leave me a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Tell me if any part of this felt familiar. I read every single one. 2 videos are waiting for you on screen right now. Stories about women who stopped waiting for their turn and started building their own table. I think you'll find something in both of them. Thank you for being here. With love and respect. See you in the next one.